The courtroom was full to capacity, every seat filled, every available space along the walls filled with spectators. It was a heavy, almost unbreathable atmosphere, as if everyone present was holding their breaths simultaneously. It rained outside, dark clouds churning across the sky, as if the very heavens were aware that something horrific was to be unveiled within these walls. Whispers wove through the air like vapors, wending their way in the charged quiet. Journalists hugged their notebooks to their chests, cameras at the ready, waiting to snap the precise second when the truth would burst into the sunlight. Kody Brown sat at the center, the man for whom people had gathered. Kody's wide shoulders appeared to shrink under the pressure of the gazes, piercing him. He sat at the defense table, his formerly assured stance now broken, his head down, his hands quivered just slightly, the slightest tremble giving away the tempest churning within him. The man who had stood tall as the head of a large family now appeared diminutive, delicate, almost defeated. But this was not about a man's pride. This was life and death. Today, though, Kody was not merely a father or a husband. He was a defendant, charged with the unthinkable, causing the death of his own son Garrison Brown. The tension builds. The judge's gavel came down with a loud crack, cutting short the low hum of voices. Order in the court. The crowd suddenly froze, becoming silent. The judge, a strict woman with piercing eyes, swept the room with a glance, commanding silence. "This is a court of law," she declared. "There will be no tantrums, no interruptions. If you cannot keep your wits about you, you will be ejected. Am I understood?" A shuffling, uneasy "Yes, Your Honor" ran through the room. For a moment, the only noise was the quiet whir of the ceiling fan and the far-off boom of thunder outside. The family shattered. The gallery was filled with the faces Kody had grown up with, his own family, though now shattered and broken beyond repair. Christine occupied the front row, her body shaking, her face covered in tears. She hadn't even attempted to wipe away. Her red and puffy eyes never left Kody. There was hurt there, but there was something else. Something darker, anger, betrayal, perhaps even hatred. Next to her, Janelle sat stiff, her fingers curled around the wooden bench so tightly that her knuckles went ghostly white. Each ragged gasp she drew was sharp and shallow, as if she were restraining herself from screaming. Down the table, Meri sat alone from the others, her face expressionless. To everybody else, she appeared to be tranquil. But the people who knew her, who had shared a life with her, could observe the tension in her jaw, the press of her lips so hard together, they'd lost their color. And Robyn, she was in the back corner, really in the shadows. Her face was pale, expressionless, like a mask covering something nobody else could perceive. She did not cry. She did not stir. She simply observed, her dark eyes darting back and forth from Kody to the other wives, impassive and calculating. The family that once occupied the same house together was now torn apart by suspicion and sorrow. The love that once bound them together had been replaced with fear, anger, and mistrust. The weight of the trial. The stakes could not have been higher. The public demanded answers. The family sought justice. The jury sought truth. And Kody? No one had any idea what he wanted anymore. Perhaps not even Kody himself. He slumped over, gazing at the gleaming wood of the defense table, his face obscured by a tangle of matted hair. In another time, he might have resembled a man merely lost in thought. But here, in this courtroom, he seemed shattered, as if under a burden too great for an individual to carry. One tear rolled down his face, but whether it was for sorrow, guilt, or fury, no one could know. The prosecutor's opening slowly, calculatedly. The prosecutor rose to his feet, and every eye in the room turned toward him. She was a woman who was feared for her savagery in the courtroom, her capacity to dismember a case bit by bit until nothing was left but bare fact. Today she resembled a predator stalking its prey. Her cutting, angular voice sliced through the strained quiet. Members of the jury, she started off, pacing slowly before them, her heels echoing on the gleaming floor. What you will hear throughout this trial is a tale unlike any other. A tale of love warped into control, of family become enemies, of loyalty, lost to betrayal. She paused abruptly, turning to Kody, arms shooting up like a whip, as she pointed straight at him. At the heart of it all is this man. A gasp rippled through the courtroom like a blast of air. Christine covered her face with her hands and wept. Janelle shrieked before sealing her hands over her mouth. Even Meri winced, her calm breaking for an instant. The prosecutor didn't miss a beat. She continued, her voice increasing in volume. Authority. Kody Brown, husband, father, leader, now stands accused of committing the vilest crime possible. He didn't merely let his family down. He utterly annihilated it. And in doing so, his very own son, Garrison, lost his life. Gasps again, this time louder, accompanied by whispers of shock and incredulity. The judge rapped the gavel, yelling for order, but the noise was almost overwhelmed by the pandemonium. The unspoken tension. The room fell silent, and Kody finally lifted his head. His bloodshot eyes, sleepless nights, and memories too painful were etched on his face. For a moment his eyes met Christine's. There was something in that glance. Years of hurt, love, and makeups behind closed doors. There was only blame now. Christine's tear-stained face turned into stone. Her eyes shouted what her lips never dared. You did this. Kody's eyes dropped, his jaw tightening, his fists curled tightly in his lap. Whispers of the past. The prosecutor went on speaking, words bringing to mind the tumultuous background of the family. For years this family was living together under one roof, united by faith and purpose. But beneath the smiles presented to the world, shadows were creeping, tensions grew, trust started to disintegrate. And when the cracks eventually extended too far, she paused dramatically, scanning her eyes over the members of the family sitting in the gallery. The whole house came down. The jurors edged in their chairs, their expressions a twist of sympathy and distrust. The voice of the prosecutor fell to a low whisper, making everyone strain to hear her next sentence. The night Garrison Brown was killed was not an accident. It was the ultimate brutal outcome of years of manipulation and emotional warfare. Her words hung in the air, thick and toxic. The moment of truth. The judge nodded, signaling for her to continue, but for a moment, even the prosecutor remained silent, letting the weight of her accusation settle over the room like a thick fog. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, she turned back to the jury. This trial will reveal what truly happened that night, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. It will reveal the lies, the secrets and the betrayals that resulted in a young man's death. And when you witness the truth bare, there will be no more doubt in your minds. Her hand shot out again, and she pointed at Kody once more. That man is guilty. The words hung in the air like a sentence of death. Christine wept louder, her shoulders trembling precariously. Janelle mumbled a prayer under her breath. Meri just glared at the floor, not looking at anyone. And Robyn did not budge at all. Her immobility was unsettling, her face unreadable, as if she saw something no one else did. The cliffhanger. The judge slammed the gavel down a second time, harder this time. Order in the courtroom. We will continue with testimony after a short recess. As the crowd started to move, the whispers returned to the room. Some talked of Kody's culpability, others spoke of Robyn's unnerving placidity. But one thing was certain. From the very first sentence uttered in that courtroom, everyone knew this trial would forever alter everything. And in the background, somewhere in the crowd, a figure crept out stealthily, unseen, a figure who knew the truth and intended to utilize it. Fade to black. The doors to the courtroom swung open with a harsh creak, and the bailiff's voice thundered, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrington." Everyone rose, stiff, mechanical, a blend of fear, rage and tension holding on to each labored breath. The judge, hard and unwavering, sat down. "Be seated," she ordered, her voice allowing no argument. Chairs scraped on the gleaming floor as the crowd complied. The trial was ready to proceed, and now it was time to have the first witness speak. Christine Brown. Christine takes the stand. Her name was called by the bailiff, and Christine stood up slowly. Her movements were strained, almost dainty, as if every step toward the witness stand had 1,000 memories she'd rather not remember. Christine's face was white, her eyes red and puffy from tears. She held a tissue in one shaking hand, and had her other hand on the edge of the bench for support. When she stood up, the room became silent. Even the newsmen appeared to hold their breath, pens poised over their notebooks. This was Garrison's mother, the woman who had loved him, nurtured him, and now had to live through the horror of his last moments. As she approached the stand, the bailiff moved forward. "Please put your left hand on the Bible, and extend your right hand." Christine complied, her voice little more than a whisper, as she took the oath to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When she sat, she did not look at Kody. Not once. Her gaze remained locked on the prosecutor, as if merely looking at Kody would destroy her willpower. The prosecutor's gentle approach. The prosecutor approached, her voice now gentle, more measured than it had been in her passionate opening statement. "Christine," she started slowly, "I know this is hard. But please don't rush. The jury must know about your friendship with Garrison, and what happened before that evening." Christine gulped hard, her voice shaking as she replied, He was my son, but he was my best friend too." Her lips trembled as she went on. "He was strong. He was funny, so full of life. Everyone adored him. But these last few months, something shifted." The prosecutor nodded understandingly. "Can you tell the court about that shift?" Christine dabbed at her eyes with her tissue. "He began withdrawing from everyone. He was silent, withdrawn. I just thought it was stress. He'd been under a great deal of stress." She spoke in a cracked voice, gasped shakily, and went on. "But then, he began saying stuff that didn't make sense." The jury leaned forward, knowing something significant was going to be revealed. The night before the tragedy, Christine's fingers twisted the tissue into pieces as she spoke. "The night before Garrison died, he called me." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Christine's breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't continue. The prosecutor moved closer, her voice warm and inviting. "Take your time, Christine. What did he say?" Christine squeezed her eyes shut, making herself go through the memory again. By the time she opened them once more, they shone with tears. "He sounded scared out of his wits," she whispered. "He told me he felt like someone was behind him, following him. I heard it in his voice. The fear. My son was frightened for his life." The courtroom burst into whispers, until the judge bashed his gavel. "Order! I will have silence." Christine clutched the sides of the witness stand, her knuckles white. "I implored him to tell me what was wrong. I asked if someone had threatened him." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Did he respond?" Christine's chin was shaking. "Yes." A held breath was released collectively. "He said to me," Christine's gaze flickered toward Kody, the first time she'd glanced at him since she came into the courtroom. Then she shifted away sharply, as if the image of him seared. "He said he no longer trusted his father." The crowd gasped, a wave of shock sweeping the courtroom. Christine dissolved into tears, sobbing so hard she could hardly talk. The prosecutor's voice grew sharp. "And when he said father, to whom was he referring?" Christine choked on her sobs. "Kody. He was speaking of Kody." The words crashed like a thunderclap. Janelle let out a cry, her sob ringing through the room. Meri turned her head away, covering behind her hands. Robyn, though, sat stock still, her face totally impassive. "The defense strikes back." Kody's lawyer sprang to his feet, his voice thundering. "Objection. Speculation." The judge slapped up a hand at once. "Sustained. The jury will ignore the witness's inference as to what Garrison was afraid of." The attorney pointed aggressively at Christine. "She can't say she knows what her son had in mind with those words. It's an emotional inference, nothing more." The judge's gaze swung to Christine. "Mrs. Brown, try not to assume, and just say what was said." Christine nodded over her tears. "Yes, Your Honor. The harm was done. The jury had heard it. The seed of doubt had been sown. And doubt in this courtroom was hazardous." A chilling revelation. The prosecutor wasn't finished. She grabbed a folder on the table and drew out one photograph, holding it up for Christine and the jury to view. The photo depicted Garrison, beaming, standing in front of his car, but his smile did not reach his eyes. There was a shadow there, a fear hiding just behind it. Christine, said the prosecutor gently. Do you know this picture? Christine's lips quivered. Yes, I did take it. That was 3 days before Before. Her voice cracked, and she put her hand over her mouth, shaking convulsively. Janelle cried softly in her seat next to Christine, mumbling prayers into the air. The prosecutor faced the jury again. Ladies and gentlemen, this photograph was taken only 3 days before Garrison's death. His friends would swear that in the last few days, Garrison was convinced someone was stalking him, someone close to him. She let the photo fall slowly, her eyes focusing again on Kody, someone he once trusted absolutely. The inference hung in the air like a clotted, suffocating mist. The cross-examination. When the prosecutor at last gave up, Kody's lawyer strolled over to Christine, his expression serene but icy. He interlaced his fingers behind his back, as he circled her like a predator stalking prey. Mrs. Brown, he said suavely, you adored your son, didn't you? Christine's tone was resolute. More than anything in life, and his death has left you speechless with pain. Christine gritted her teeth. Yes. The attorney held the silence for a moment before striking. So isn't it possible, Mrs. Brown, that in your mourning, you've sworn yourself to things that aren't true? That you've misunderstood your son's words? Christine's breath caught. No, I know what he said. I know my son. The lawyer's tone turned cold. But you don't know who he was frightened of. Not absolutely. Isn't that right? Christine stumbled, her voice breaking. I guess not absolutely. But the lawyer struck. No more questions, Your Honor. Aftermath of the testimony. Christine lurched from the witness stand, barely keeping her legs under her. Janelle was beside her in an instant, her arms around her shoulders, both women shaking. Kody sat unmoving, his expression a mask, but under the table, his fists were tightly clenched, so that his nails bit into his palms, making deep, angry gashes. As Christine walked by, she at last turned to him, her eyes burning through her tears. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The glance spoke volumes. I will never forgive you. Robyn's cold watch. In the corner of the room, Robyn sat like a statue, her hands folded impeccably in her lap. She hadn't winced when Christine talked. She hadn't wept, hadn't gasped, hadn't shifted position. Her immobility was frightening, almost inhuman. For an instant second, her lips twitched into the barest touch of a smile, so slight it might have been dreamed. But Christine noticed it, and it ran shivers directly down her spine. The judge's warning. The judge's voice sliced through the tension. We're going to take a 15-minute recess before we call the next witness. I remind you all, this is a court of law. Keep yourselves under control, or you'll be taken out. She brought the gavel down with a resounding crash, calling the break. As feet rose from seats, the room hummed with murmurs. Christine's testimony had sparked something fierce, not only in the courtroom, but within the hearts of all who witnessed it. But the truth remained hidden in obscurity, and someone was going to keep it there. Fade to black. The courtroom hummed with the buzz of murmurs. When the recess concluded, the air seemed thicker, heavier than before, as if each whispered secret, and each labored breath, bore the weight of 1,000 unspoken answers. When the judge returned, the crowd instantly stood up. Her stern eyes swept over the room like a knife. Sit, she commanded, and everyone sat immediately. The bailiff brought the court back to order, his voice echoing off the walls, booming like thunder in the distance. The atmosphere becomes electric. Kody sat rigidly still at the defense table, his complexion wan, his lips compressed into a thin line. His hands lay flat on the table, now, but if anyone looked closely, they'd see the way his fingers trembled, betraying the storm brewing beneath the surface. Across the aisle, Christine sat clutching Janelle's hand so tightly that both their knuckles were white. Meri sat rigid, staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. And Robyn sat alone, her stance eerily relaxed, as if she were simply observing, and not one of the prime actors in this drama. The air was charged so heavily, it seemed to take on a life of its own, seeping into every corner of the room. The judge's voice sliced through the crushing quiet. Prosecution, you may call your next witness. The prosecutor stood up slowly, a hint of knowing in her eyes, but instead of calling a person, she made a surprising move. Your Honor, she said with deliberate weight, The state would like to introduce an audio recording into evidence. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, like a sudden gust of wind. Christine's breath caught, and Janelle's hand flew to her mouth. Even Meri's cold exterior cracked for just a second, her head snapping up in shock. The revelation of the recording. The judge raised an eyebrow. Is this recording authenticated? Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor assured. It was found on Garrison Brown's private phone and examined by the state's forensic technicians. Kody's attorney jumped to his feet at once. Objection, Your Honor. We have not been given adequate time to review this evidence. The prosecutor did not bat an eye. The defense was apprised of its existence yesterday. They have had every chance. The judge paused for a moment, then nodded curtly. Overruled. The tape will be admitted. The tension doubled, as if the courtroom itself was holding its breath. The prosecutor stood and addressed the jury, her face solemn. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are hearing is the last known recording of Garrison Brown's voice. It was made just hours before he died. The recording plays. The bailiff lowered the lights a bit, as the prosecutor activated a small speaker, resting on the evidence table. There was initial static, the quiet whisper of white noise. Then, a trembling, shaken voice filled the room. Garrison's voice. Dad, please. Just talk to me, he stated, his voice desperate, on the brink of panic. The sound of labored breathing filtered through, as if he were hiding or running. I just want to know the truth. Why are you doing this to me? Christine collapsed at once, crying in great racking sobs into her hands. Janelle's tears fell silently down her face, as she rocked gently in her seat. The recording resumed. There was a lull, an icy, stifling silence. And then yet another voice. This voice was low, threatening, and full of venom. You should have kept your mouth shut, Garrison. You know what becomes of those who go digging around too much. The room gasped in unison. It was unmistakable. The tone, the rhythm. It was the exact voice of Kody Brown. Christine shrieked. No. While Janelle covered her face with her hands. Meri sat stock still, mouth agape, eyes wide with shock. But the most disturbing response came from Robyn. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just sat there, completely motionless, her face expressionless, her hands lying neatly in her lap. Chaos erupts. The courtroom erupted into pandemonium. That's a lie, Kody bellowed, leaping to his feet, his chair crashing back against the wall. His face was red, veins throbbing in his neck, his voice hoarse with despair. That's not me. I never said that. I never did. The judge pounded her gavel again and again. Order. I will have order in this courtroom. The crowd quieted grudgingly, although the tension still rang in the air from Kody's outburst. Kody's lawyer put his hand on Kody's shoulder, urging him to sit. Calm down, he growled under his breath. Losing control will only make this worse. Kody slumped back into his chair, but his eyes were ablaze with anger and terror. The prosecutor, unruffled, faced the jury again. The evidence speaks for itself. Garrison was afraid, and in his death throes, he clung to the one person he was most afraid of, his father. The voice you heard is evidence of that terror, the seeds of doubt. The jurors shifted restlessly, their faces torn. Some seemed convinced, others in doubt. But one thing was certain, that tape had altered all. Christine held on to Janelle, saying, I told you. He hurt Garrison. Janelle nodded silently, her eyes streaming with tears, her face white and gaunt. Meri, on the other hand, gazed at the table, her hands shaking. For years she had been by Kody's side through every tempest, but now she didn't know if she even knew the man across from her. And Robyn's lips curled, almost too subtly, as if she was fighting a grin. It vanished in a flash, but Christine noticed it, and it sent chills down to her bones. The defense fights back. Kody's lawyer stood up with newfound resolve. Your Honor, he started, his tone pointed. The defense vigorously challenges the legitimacy of that tape. The judge scowled. It has been confirmed by experts. Maybe so, the attorney went on suavely, but voice tapes are tamperable. We are an era of technology, when anyone can get something to sound like anyone else. He addressed the jury, his voice becoming more impassioned. Ask yourselves this. If Kody actually uttered those words, why would he leave a trail? Why would he let himself be caught on tape so clearly?
so conveniently, a matter of hours before his son's demise. Some of the jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The attorney continued, his tone now soft and compelling. There is someone in this room who has something to gain by making Kody appear guilty. Someone who stands to benefit from everything if this family is broken up. For the first time, his eyes flashed momentarily toward Robyn. The family implodes. Christine leapt to her feet, pointing at Kody. Stop distorting the truth, she yelled through her tears. Garrison was afraid of you, Kody. He said so. You did this. The judge's gavel came down again and again. Mrs. Brown, sit down, or you will be removed from this courtroom. Christine slumped back in her chair, crying helplessly, as Janelle hugged her close, murmuring reassurance. Meri jerked her head fiercely towards Kody. Her words were soft, but knife-sharp. Did you, Kody? Did you tell him that? Kody's eyes brimmed with tears. Meri, I promise you my life. I didn't. I don't even know what Garrison was saying. I never heard him. But even as he spoke, uncertainty flickered in Meri's eyes. She didn't know if she believed him anymore. A glimmer of something more. When the commotion faded, the prosecutor moved forward again. Your Honor, the state rests its case for today. We will continue tomorrow with more witnesses. The judge nodded and struck the gavel. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Individuals rose, gathering their belongings, their voices low but insistent. Christine and Janelle held each other, their anguish fresh and all-consuming. Meri walked out alone, shoulders slumped, lost in thought. But Robyn sat another moment longer, hands folded demurely in her lap. Then she stood, slowly, and for the split second, her face altered. The mask of calm detachment was gone. In its place, a flicker of satisfaction, cold and black. No one noticed but Kody. And when their eyes locked, his stomach hit the floor. For the first time, he questioned whether he wasn't merely fighting for his freedom, but also for someone who would stop at nothing to annihilate him. The cliffhanger. While being led out of the courtroom by his lawyer, Christine's shrieks resonated down the corridor. The sound tore at his very soul. Every sob a cruel reminder of the son he'd lost, and the family he was losing piece by piece. He turned around for the final time, and saw Robyn alone at the doors of the courtroom, looking at him with a subdued, enigmatic smile. At that moment, Kody knew a horrifying realization. The deadliest wars hadn't been waged in court. They were waged behind closed doors, by the people you most trusted. Fade to black. The courthouse was almost deserted when Kody emerged, with his lawyer and a cloud of reporters hollering questions. Camera flashes illuminated the darkness like lightning, voices piling on in a cacophonous tempest. Kody, what do you have to say regarding the tape? Did you threaten your son Garrison? Are you to blame for his death? Kody's head remained down, his jaw locked tight, muscling past them without saying a word. His lawyer shouted at the reporters, no comment, as they pushed towards an awaiting black SUV. Within the vehicle, Kody finally permitted himself to exhale, though it was raspy and uneven. His whole body shook with anger, sorrow, and something much worse, fear. For the first time since this nightmare started, he fully comprehended what was on the line. This wasn't merely about his name being cleared. Someone had wanted him killed, and they were getting away with it. Christine confronts Robyn. Back in the courthouse, Christine hovered in the hallway, stalking like a lioness. When Robyn finally emerged, Christine pounced. How dare you sit there and do nothing? Christine spat, her voice dripping venom. You watched what that tape did to all of them. To me, to Janelle, to Meri, and you just sat there like some cold statue. Robyn's face didn't waver. Christine, this isn't the time. The time. Christine's voice cracked, sorrow and anger mingling. My son is dead, Robyn. Dead, and you don't even cry. Why is that? A few reporters in the vicinity slowed, their cameras swiveling toward the oncoming showdown. Robyn's lips quivered only minimally, but her eyes were dry, calculating. I mourn in my own manner, Robyn murmured, too quietly. Unlike you, I do not make a show of it. Christine's breath was caught, speechless in shock. That statement stung like a slap.
Janelle appeared before she could answer, inserting herself between them like a buffer. Christine, please stop, Janelle pleaded, her voice shaking. We have to stay focused. The trial ain't finished. Let's just go home. Christine let herself be drawn back, though she never broke eye contact with Robyn. Deep down inside, something whispered to her what she didn't want to hear. Robyn was hiding more than she admitted. A private meeting that night. In a dark hotel room, Kody and his lawyer reflected on the day's debacle. That tape ruined us, Kody growled, striding back and forth. The jury heard my voice. The actual words. What hope do we have now? His lawyer settled back, serene and strategic. The case against us is made of perception, not evidence. We can destroy it, but only if we find out where that tape originated and who had access to it. Kody ceased his pacing, his forehead creasing. You think somebody put it there? The attorney nodded slowly. It's too convenient, too neat, almost like someone wished the world to think you were guilty. Kody's thoughts instantly went to Christine. She hated him enough to frame him, didn't she? But then, like a shadowy intrusion, another idea took hold. Robyn, she had been strangely serene today, practically aloof. And when their eyes locked up in court, he'd caught something sinister in her face. Something that had crawled under his skin. No, he'd whispered, shaking his head. It couldn't be her, but even as he spoke, uncertainty gnawed at his stomach. Robyn's secret phone call across town. Robyn sat alone in her spotless, flawlessly decorated living room. The house was quiet, nearly unnaturally quiet, as she filled herself a glass of red wine. Moonlight that poured through the window cast eerie shadows upon the room, making her serene expression sinister. She reached for her phone and dialed a number. When the line connected, her voice fell into a low, slippery tone. It went perfectly. The recording had just the effect we were looking for. Christine's breakdown, Janelle's overcome with sorrow, and Kody, well, he's just where he's supposed to be. The voice at the other end muttered something incomprehensible. But Robyn's reply was shiveringly articulate. No loose ends. Garrison did what he was needed to do. And now, so will Kody. She put down the phone, her expression lacking any warmth. For an instant, a wicked smile flickered on her lips before vanishing as rapidly. If someone had looked at her then, they would have known the truth. Robyn wasn't a bereaved wife. She was a manipulator, tugging on all the strings in this convoluted game. Meri begins to doubt. The morning after, Meri sat by herself at her kitchen table, drinking lukewarm coffee, and gazing blankly at a picture of Garrison. Memories swamped her mind. Garrison's laughter, kindness, the way he had the ability to bring light into every room. The hurt was indescribable, but so was the not knowing. For years she had stood up for Kody in front of Christine, Janelle, and anyone else who wanted to throw him down. But now, she didn't know what to believe. When her phone vibrated with a text message, she startled. It was from Christine. Meri, please, visit me at my home. I must speak with you. It concerns Robyn. Meri hesitated, conflicted, but something within pushed her to get up and go. If there was even a possibility that Robyn was covering something up, she had to know. The meeting of the wives' Christine's living room was charged with tension when Meri walked in. Christine, Janelle, and even some of Garrison's friends huddled together in a small circle, faces grim. Thank you for coming, Christine said softly, her voice rough from crying. I know you've been faithful to Kody, but there is something you need to see. She took Meri a small flash drive. Garrison left this to me several weeks ago before he died. I had no idea what it was until last night. Meri's hands shook as she plugged the drive into Christine's laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing hidden videos, recordings Garrison had made in secret. The first clip showed Robyn speaking on the phone, her voice icy. If Kody doesn't cooperate, we'll make sure everyone thinks he's the monster, Robyn said clearly. Christine and Janelle will eat it up, and Meri, well, she's too blind to see the truth. Meri's stomach dropped. Her knees went weak as she watched clip after clip, each one painting Robyn as the architect of the chaos. When the last video ended, Christine's voice broke through the stunned silence. Meri, Robyn framed Kody. She manipulated all of us, and Garrison figured it out. That's why he died. The realization Meri covered her mouth, sobbing. Everything she thought she knew shattered in an instant. We have to go to court, Janelle declared sternly. The jury has to know who the real villain is. But Christine shook her head, looking grim. No, if we go direct to court, Robyn will find a way to spin it. We have to catch her out, with irrefutable proof. Meri's eyes flared with renewed determination. She saw Robyn for the first time, not as a sister wife, but as a predator. Then we set a trap, she said harshly, and we ensure Robyn hangs herself on her own lies. The trap is set. The operation was simple but risky. Christine would confront Robyn in private, feigning innocence. In the meantime, Janelle and Meri covertly taped the whole encounter, praying to get Robyn to confess her sins. With her hands trembling in terror and anger, Christine was about to confront Robyn. You don't have to do this alone, Janelle urged, touching her shoulder. Yes, I do, Christine responded firmly. For Garrison. The final move the next day. Christine invited Robyn to a remote cabin in the name of making amends. When Robyn showed up, she was a fake smile and false warmth. Christine, it's so great to see you. I've been concerned about you. Christine managed a shaky smile. I need some answers, Robyn. About Garrison, about all of this. As the conversation went on, Robyn started to drop her guard, her arrogance seeping in. And then at last, she spoke the words that condemned her. Garrison was a threat. Kody was a pawn. And you've always been so easy to manipulate. From her hiding spot, Janelle hit the record button. The truth was finally out. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was taken, every standing space filled. People lined the walls. Reporters crouched with cameras ready, and an almost electric hum buzzed through the crowd. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a national spectacle, the downfall of a once celebrity polygamous clan, now broken by betrayal, death, and secrets too dark to remain buried. Behind the defense table, Kody sat tense and pale, his eyes sunken from sleep deprivation. His hands clutched the table's edge as if a lifeline. His whole future, his freedom, hung in the balance of what would transpire today. Christine sat in the gallery between Janelle and Meri. The three women were together now, their previous factions melted away by sorrow and truth. But Christine's jaw was clenched, her eyes circled with tears. She wasn't here for justice alone, she was here for Garrison. And Robyn sat utterly still, wearing black, her face the epitome of sadness. To all appearances, she was the widowed victim, the casualty of events that had been beyond her control. But beneath that guise was a predator, who believed she was invulnerable. Today that delusion would be dispelled. The judge calls the court to order. The gavel crashed down, resounding like a gunshot. This court is now in session, she pronounced in a crisp tone. Prosecution, you may go ahead with your closing testimony. The prosecutor stood, unruffled but assertive. Your Honor, this morning we present new evidence that turns everything around. Evidence that establishes this case isn't about Kody Brown killing his son. It's about someone else altogether. Someone who happens to be seated in this same room. Whispers swirled throughout the courtroom like a burst of air. Robyn's lips twisted into a weak, sarcastic smile. Desperate theatrics, she whispered to herself. But Christine's heart raced. This was it, the moment they had taken a risk for. The hidden recording. The prosecutor nodded at Janelle, who moved forward with a tiny flash drive. Her hands trembled a little, but her voice was firm as she spoke. This was recorded just 2 days ago. Robyn's eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of concern passed over her face. Lights flickered a little as the video came on the big courtroom screen. First, silence. The fuzzy image of a cabin interior. Then Christine's voice in the room. Robyn, I need answers, Robyn. About Garrison. About everything. Gasps ran through the gallery as Robyn showed up on screen, her smile of kindness firmly intact. Don't blame yourself, Christine. Video, Robyn said, sugary sweet. Garrison was upset. Kody was, well, he was useful for a while. The room fell dead silent. Christine's voice shook on screen. Useful? What do you mean by that? Robyn's expression changed, her voice growing darker. Garrison was a threat. He discovered what I was doing, how I was shifting the money, playing everyone. If he had spoken out, everything I have built would have fallen apart. Kody was just a pawn to take the fall. The last words hit the room like a physical blow. And you, Christine. Robyn's voice dropped to a whisper, cold and venomous. You've always been so easy to manipulate. The video ended abruptly. For a moment there was absolute silence. Even the judge sat frozen, her mouth slightly open in shock. Then, all at once, the courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Spectators gasped. Christine cried openly, hugging Janelle as Meri covered her mouth in horror. Robyn's mask cracks. Robyn sprang up from her seat, her serene facade cracking. That video is fake. She screamed at the top of her lungs. It's a deep fake. They framed me. But her voice broke under fear. Christine rose from her seat, her body shaking but her voice firm. No, Robyn, that's your voice, your words. You killed my son, and attempted to kill Kody to keep it a secret. The judge pounded her gavel again and again. Order, order in this courtroom. But the chaos wouldn't cease. Kody stood up slowly, turning toward Robyn. His eyes were brimming with tears, his voice husky but firm. All this time, I believed Christine hated me so much she'd set me up. But you, Robyn, you were meant to love me, and you used me as a tool against my very own family. Robyn stepped back, as if his words were punches. I did it for us, Kody, she begged, her mask cracking into desperation. For our future, Garrison was going to destroy everything. I had no other choice. The room gasped at her words, condemning her to a fate, the arrest. The prosecutor advanced, her voice cold as ice. Your Honor, in light of this confession and the supporting evidence, the state requests the immediate arrest of Robyn Brown on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and the murder of Garrison Brown. The judge didn't blink. Bailiff, take her into custody. Two officers advanced quickly toward Robyn. No, Robyn screamed, thrashing furiously. You can't do this to me. I created this family. You all owe me. Her cries reverberated throughout the chamber, as the officers handcuffed her, forcing her hands behind her back, and clicking the cuffs shut. Christine turned away, not wanting to witness. Janelle silently sobbed, while Meri sat in shocked silence, finally realizing who Robyn really was. As Robyn was pulled out, her eyes met Kody's. You'll regret this, Kody, she shouted. Without me, you are nothing. Then the doors slammed behind her. The verdict? The judge addressed the jury, her face serious. Members of the jury, you have now heard evidence that clears the defendant and identifies a completely different perpetrator. In light of this new information, the court dismisses all charges against Kody Brown. Christine slumped into Janelle's arms, weeping. Kody dropped to his knees, relief and grief overwhelming him. The jury was dismissed, their faces pale with shock. They had been willing to sentence an innocent man, and would never forget it. A private moment later, as the courtroom cleared, Christine went over to Kody. Her eyes were puffy and red, but her voice was steady. Don't think that this is forgiveness, Kody. You weren't guilty of killing Garrison, but you weren't innocent in the way that you treated him either. Kody nodded, his face streaming with tears. I know, I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Christine turned to leave, but paused at the door. Garrison deserved better, she whispered. From all of us, and then she was gone. The final twist. That night, Robyn sat alone in a dark holding cell. Her once perfect hair was disheveled, her hands trembling as she stared at the wall. Suddenly a shadow appeared outside her cell, a figure the audience couldn't quite see. You failed, the voice said coldly, and now you've dragged us both down. Robyn's eyes widened in terror. No, please, she begged. I can fix this. Just get me out of here. The shadowy figure leaned closer, revealing only a sinister smile. No, Robyn, it's time for a new plan, one that doesn't include you. Before Robyn had time to react, the figure vanished into the night, leaving her shaking. Fade to black. The camera would stay on Robyn's frightened face as a gavel boomed in the distance. A final caption would appear on screen. Justice was served, but the real mastermind is still on the loose. Fade out.